Talking baseball, baseball and the O's.
Oh, welcome back, Birdland, to yet another episode of the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Benny Becker. So thrilled to be with you, gang, here today, and we have a phenomenal episode on our hands, like always. We're going to catch you up on last night's game against the Royals. Last night's episode we were doing while the game was on, and so you got some live reactions of me during certain plays and certain moments. I was trying to keep it a little tight to the vest because I wanted to talk about it mostly today. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to touch into last night's games, and there's a lot of things to like about what we saw last night. We're also going to talk about the offensive standouts, the defensive standouts. We're going to touch on some of the pitching that happened last night. Also, maybe a new celebration the Orioles have going on. We'll get to that. Yesterday, we also talked a little about how the guys, the top prospects in AAA, have started the season. I want to dig in a little more to that and show you guys a little more in-depth numbers to just how hot some of these close to major league players are performing early in the season. And also, I kind of want to touch on Ramon Urias at some point later in the episode as well. The two are going to go hand in hand between Urias and the prospects. It's a little something we talked about last episode that we're going to dig more into on this one, right? But let's just start with last night's game. A phenomenal game. It was a tough game. It was the opening game in the series against the Royals. At home, we obviously went 2-1 in the opening game, or opening series of the season against the Angels. Now we came into this one, and we were talking about how they really need to win 2 out of every 3 games in this first 36-game stretch to really get on not only a good projection moving forward, but give themselves the best opportunity to not only make the playoffs, but ultimately be that 1 seed in the American League. Again, potentially winning the division as well if it got to that point. But it all starts, with these individual games. It's a one step at a time process this season. You can't win it all at this time. You can't win it all in April, but you certainly could put yourself in a hole and a deficit in April, right? So the Orioles have been playing very good baseball to start this season. And last night, you probably know. If you're watching this Orioles podcast, you probably already know what happened. Part of me wanted to be like, oh, let's save the suspense. But let's just get it out of the way, gang. Let's just open up the floodgates early. The Westy Walkoff game, as it will be forever known. And hopefully there's a lot more Westy Walkoffs potentially coming. But either way, this was Westburg's first walk-off victory. Also, the Orioles' first comeback victory on the season. So, just to kind of fly through the game a little bit, if you didn't watch every pitch or you just want a little refresher on what happened last night, the Royals got up early. They put up 3 in the 3rd inning. First was on a Bobby Witt Jr. solo home run. They're immensely talented top player in their system and a guy that signed this huge extension. He'll be there for a while, which is going to be cool to see because he is an absolute superstar in this league, and we see why instantly. We saw it last year. We saw it maybe even 2 years ago. I believe he was up, but certainly we see it last night in his solo home run. He was all over the field making defensive plays, hitting that home run to put them up 1-0. Also in that 3rd inning, catcher Sal Perez, the veteran, also hit a 2-run home run, putting the Royals up ultimately 3-0 in that 3rd inning. Now, it's funny. I didn't dig into numbers here and there. I really didn't look too much into it, but I feel like Sal Perez is a guy that does damage to the Orioles at least every time they're in Camden Yards, if not every time they play the Royals, man. That guy, I know he's been a stud for them for a long time. I know he's one of the elder superstars, or at least borderline superstars in the league. And it should be no surprise that he plays the Orioles well, just like he plays everybody else well. But it seems like Sal Perez always hits dingers against these Orioles. Again, I didn't dig into it. It's just my memory, if it serves me right, means Sal Perez crushes the Orioles. But 3-3 after the top of the third, really after the third in general. And the Orioles ended up tying it in the third. So it started off with an Adley Rutschman double, led next by a Santander RBI single, which after that came Ryan Mountcastle's 2-run home run to tie the game at 3-3. You love seeing it. Mountcastle's first home run of the season. He got robbed by that wall by like a foot, I believe, on opening day. Maybe it was game 2, but either way, just missed a home run earlier. And it's funny, in yesterday's episode, like I said, you were getting live reactions for me. When that Mountcastle home run happened, I was overjoyed. And then you could probably, if you rewatch it, see the look in my eyes when I realized, as a gambler, crap, I had him picked for hitting a home run tonight, and I switched it for Santander. And it's one of those where it's like, damn it, I was right there. But no matter what, I want to get this message across. Anytime I talk gambling, anytime I have a bet on this, I ultimately want the Orioles to win every single day. Now, I will also put a disclaimer is, I bet the Orioles every single day. So them winning makes me money also. That's not why I bet them or like them. That I love the Orioles from literally the time I was born to throughout my entire life. So nothing has ever changed in my Orioles love. And I only bet them not because I love them, but when it's time that you can bet them almost every single day or every single day and make money off of it. Like last year was, like the second half of 2 years ago was. Hell, really the whole season of 2 years ago, because their odds were so bad, especially early in the year, you could still bet them every day and make money. Just like I did in the mid-2010s every day and made a ton of money when they became really the most profitable team in any sport to gamble on, maybe ever in that period of time. And you might say crazy, but like I'm telling you, that is literally what the numbers say, if not exactly the top, right there at the top. At least as far as the 2000s go, I think that Orioles stretch of teams is the most profitable. But I'm getting off topic, getting a little sideways. Ultimately, you probably saw the look in my eyes, upset that I wasn't on that Mountcastle home run. Overall, though, I will take an Orioles home run, even from guys I'm not on, even if it was a guy that I was about to be on and then I talked myself out of. Ultimately, I want the Orioles to win over everything. So, yeah, I was very happy to see that home run get over the wall and tie the game at 3-3 after 4. So then we kind of had a few innings of nothingness as far as scoring goes. The Orioles actually took the lead in the bottom of the 8th. Now, it was somewhat fortunate, I would say, being able to take the lead at that point, because the Royals' first baseman kind of screwed them royally. No pun intended. And the inning started with a Gunnar Henderson 1-out single, or at least the rally started with the Gunnar Henderson 1-out single. That was then followed up by Adley Rutschman smoking a ball down the first base line. The first baseman kind of snagging it, but ultimately losing it after he knocks it down. Like, it was one of these where he hits it and he can't find it. And if you've ever played baseball and you've ever been in that position, it's a helpless feeling because you know the ball is right around you, but you are spinning and looking and you can't find it. In fact, at one point, it looks like even though it would have been too late to make the play, it looks like he spots the ball and where it is. And still, in that moment, you are so, like, flabbergasted. You are so lost that even after it looks like he's staring right at the baseball, he's still looking around afterwards because he doesn't know where it is. So the second baseman has to run in, grab the ball before anybody can advance extra bases. But ultimately, it was a huge point for the Orioles in that. Now, I don't believe the Royals would have had any chance of turning 2 on that play, but neither here or there, Adley would have been out and on a normal play, which then probably would have been a problem because after that, Gunnar advanced on a Santander long line drive, if I remember. I think it was a deep left, if I remember correctly. Didn't quite get out, wasn't exactly there, but it was definitely deep enough where Gunnar Henderson was able to advance. Now, again, Gunnar got on with one out. So if Adley gets out and Santander flies out, or lines out, I think as they have it in the box score, it's end of the inning, and the game remains tied. Instead, Orioles have men on the corners, 2 outs, when Mountcastle comes up to the plate. And he draws a full count, which is important to what winds up happening. Draws a full count, and he hits a ground ball, but in between short and third, deep in the hole. Now, we talked Bobby Witt and how fantastic of a player he is, and that's a perfect play that not only did he get to that ball, but he pops up very quickly and throws pretty much a good ball to that first baseman. It kind of short hopped the first baseman a little. However, again, this was an amazing play in the making if Witt makes that. So ultimately, though, the first baseman who just made a mistake 2 batters ago now goes for the scoop, and it was very dramatic, especially from the camera angle that the Orioles were showing it from, where, the throw beats him, and then you're like waiting a second, and then the ball just magically pops up in the air. And it was this rush of emotion. I'm screaming on my couch, ecstatic about it. But ultimately, it drives in Gunnar Henderson, and the Orioles can take that 4-3 lead headed into the 9th. And I said that it was important that he drew the full count, and that's mainly because Adley Rutschman was in motion then on that pitch. He was running to second on that pitch, which could have been the difference maker, because Adley, while he has good speed for a catcher, certainly isn't Jorge Mateo out there or Gunnar Henderson out there. He's not flying down the bases, right? And so even with leaving on contact, if he's not running on the pitch, if he's waiting until contact, then it becomes Bobby Witt could have potentially wung that thing to second and got an Adley out at second on the force. So Adley, being in motion, takes that away, forces Witt to have to go the long way to first base, in which case he made the play. The first baseman just couldn't finish the play, putting the Orioles up 4-3, headed into the 9th. Now, that's a situation that if we had Felix Bautista. If we had Felix Bautista, then it was just one of these things where Orioles fans are used to that basically being game over. If you bring a lead into the 9th for Felix Bautista, it's game over. Or at least it was the past year and a half when he was healthy. So 2 years maybe, if you want to say that. But ultimately, this year we don't have Bautista. We know that. And we've talked in spring training about Craig Kimbrel. And I mentioned how I was not only born in Philly, but grew up, raised, and still live in South Jersey. So I'm around a lot of Phillies fans. Most of the people I interact with on a daily basis and talk baseball to are Phillies fans. So when the Orioles signed Kimbrel after last season, it was one of these things where all these Phillies fans were like, oh man, what do you think about that? But asking me because they wanted to crush it. They wanted to crush Kimbrel. And while I did lay out a path this spring training on the idea that Kimbrel could eventually lose the job and lining up potentially the replacements, at least in-house for him, that we could have, I also mentioned that I wanted him for reliever of the year. I wanted him to lead the league in saves. I thought that there were certainly chances that that happened instead of him losing the job. Now, neither, I think, are anywhere close. I don't think he's anywhere close to being in the conversation for reliever of the year right now, just like I don't think he's really close to losing the job. However, last night was his first Orioles outing. and it did not go according to plan. Now, I don't want to overreact to one blown stave, okay? Also, I certainly don't want to overreact because he really didn't look terrible, man. He really didn't look terrible. Like, he's had to reinvent himself a few times throughout his career. He's not necessarily the flamethrower strikeout pitcher that he was when he was younger. It happens. But he's a major league veteran pitcher who understands how to get outs in this game. And that's what it looked like he was doing throughout that inning, or at least in the beginning of the inning. He gets the first man out. The second man, he runs a longer count, gets a pop-up to short left. The problem is the Orioles had somewhat of a shift on, meaning that Gunnar was farther away and Urias was more the one that had to try and track the ball. He did not do a good job. In fact, I saw somebody pointing out that Urias actually took, I think, 2 steps in, at least a step off the bat in and not back. So he didn't get a good read on the ball. And he really, throughout that whole play, at that point, had no chance. He wasn't, I think even knew he couldn't get to that baseball. But even if he thought he could, he certainly didn't look like he was showing much effort to get out there. Gunnar Henderson was the one on his horse trying to get out to that ball and just wasn't able to get there. So a little bloop single gets a man on with 1 out. Now, if I have a closer that I'm confident in, that's not anything to worry about. And what happened next was something that brought me back to last year, but something I had forgotten about during all of these Craig Kimbrel conversations, whether it was with people, whether it was on here, whether it was in my own mind. It was just something that, a liability that I forgot all about and truly showed itself last night and could ultimately be the demise of why the Kimbrel experiment doesn't work out. I hope it still does. I do. I really do. Ultimately, though, Craig Kimbrel cannot hold men on base. Doesn't even attempt. Like, these guys are running, possibly not even before he started his move. But it was one of these things where, so the Royals pinch ran for the guy that got the bloop single with their speedster. And while the guy might be fast and a great athletic and great running ability, he's not, as far as I know, the top guy as far as, running 90 feet sprint time. So he's not necessarily one of the elite base stealers in the league. And not only did he steal second, but he wound up stealing third as well. And it's a liability. It really is. If Kimbrel's not going to hold any men on, because we have Adley, somebody who can gun out runners frequently, even with great jumps. In fact, the third base steal, Adley made in a tremendous play and truly one of the best throws I've ever seen down to third base. This ball was right on the money. And, Urias maybe didn't put down the tag. Maybe he did graze him. Either way, Orioles challenged. There wasn't at least a camera angle that showed that the tag was applied before he got on the base. And the runner was ultimately safe at third. It's a problem. It's absolutely a problem. And we'll dig more into it, okay? I want to get through the game before I dig too much into it. But ultimately, Craig Kimbrel not paying attention to the man on base and just giving him these bases is not going to work moving forward, okay? I'm sorry, what is this, Sunday men's league in a beer league? Like, come on, man. So, ultimately, the Royals wind up with a man on third, 1 out, and that runner drives him in with a sac fly. Kimbrel blows the save, gets the next guy out, I believe, on a strikeout. So then we head to the bottom of the 9th, and first man got out. Cedric Mullins got a single. Looked like, I believe it could have been a gapper, if I remember a right one. Looked like it was going to be a gapper and then got cut off, and Mullins was forced to stay at first. Wouldn't matter, though. It wouldn't matter. It's my main man, Jordan Westburg. Westy came through in the clutch, walk-off Westy, hit the ball out, right center, gets it over the wall, 2-run home run, walk-off, ending the game for the Orioles in a victory. It was beautiful. Like I said, it was their first comeback victory of the season. It was a hard-fought victory. Again, shows how this team just never quits. This team never feels they're out of it, okay? Go down 3-0 in the third, no worries. We're going to tie it 3-3 in the fourth. Get into some sticky situations defensively and pitching-wise, no problem, and we'll touch more on that, but no problem. Get out of those jams. Make the defensive plays. And then offensively, find ways to win the game. So that was ultimately the game, and we're going to touch more into multiple points there. I don't know if you saw, I just literally threw my pen in excitement. I don't need the pen right now, so we'll leave it on the ground, gang. But I think that's a funny thing somebody might have noticed, and I just wanted to point it out. So first thing we're going to touch on is what we just left on, is that Jordan Westburg walk-off, the Westy walk-off, as I like to refer to it. It's got a nice ring to it. It was his first walk-off not only in Major League Baseball, not only in professional baseball, but from what he says in his whole life. Now, I don't have StatCast from the guy's Little League games, but from what he's telling me, it was the first time he's ever had a walk-off in his life. So it was a cool moment. In fact, he said it was the coolest moment he's had in the majors, and I bet it was. Now, this is a guy who was very tough on himself, very tough on himself mentally. And ultimately, he started off spring training a little cold, a little not great offensively, and I know he was very tough on himself in that stretch. But he's all about continuing to put in the same work, continuing the same mindset, trusting the process, and trusting in his abilities to have that turnaround. I know he had a line last night, not being so result-oriented. And that's so big in baseball. Sometimes you get so dead set on the result. I need this hit. I need extra base hits. I need home runs. That, you're forcing it, and that stuff's not going to come when you're forcing it. So sometimes when you just play loose and you just trust in it, and you understand that you have these abilities, and you put in this work, and you have this training, and you have this knowledge, it all comes together perfectly. And we see what happens. Jordan Westburg, walk-off home run. Now, it was only his 4th home run in the majors. He had 3 last year, 1 this year, and I believe more home runs are to come. Now, I'm not pegging him at 20, 30 home runs, at least this point in his career, but I certainly think him ending the season at 15 to 20 is absolutely possible. If you look at his last 2 seasons in the minor leagues, he had 45 home runs in 205 games, right? So if we go back to last year, I believe he played in about 60 games. Maybe I'm wrong about that, give or take. But neither here or there, if you add it to the 160, so that's going to equal, give or take, around that 200 number, which means I'm not expecting the 45 home runs, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's a third of that at 15. I believe that's very possible. I think Jordan Westburg is slowly coming into his own. And it's nice almost for Jordy that he doesn't have to have the spotlight on him at all times. Guys like Rushman, guys like Henderson, some of these veterans can take the spotlight away from him. Heck, even a Jackson Holiday, when he gets here, will take some of the spotlight away from Westburg, allowing Westburg to play ultimately his best baseball. And I've talked for what feels like, I think, 5 straight episodes, if not more, about how Jordan Westburg is a huge piece to this team's success. Because not only is he just a great role player, but ultimately I believe he has the talent to be even better than a role player, quote unquote. And if all we need him to be is that role player, that's when, again, he's loose and he's normal and he's not stressing and he's not trying to do more than he has to, which will lead to great results like we saw last night. And hell, I don't know if this might be a new thing for him or not, but he's grown this mustache and I kind of like it. It kind of has a cool look for him. I know he's on the fence about it. He's not sure if it's here to stay or if it will be gone by the weekend even. But ultimately, I personally think it's kind of a cool look. And we're going to get to something a little later that's going to tie back into the mustache. But you never know what he can quite do style-wise with that mustache. And again, that'll make more sense later on in the episode. But I do like the mustache Westy. I gotta say, I like the Westy stash. And ultimately, I think big things are coming for Jordan Westburg this season as an Oriole. Excuse me. Very parched. So, one of the big things I saw from last night is just how special the Orioles are defensively out there. Now, we've talked about this multiple times. We know they've had very positive defensive metrics. In fact, if I remember correctly, last season at this time, they were actually going through some weird defensive struggles. They started the season that first week, two, even first month maybe, with some very poor defensive play. And it cost them some games in that stretch. It's very nice to see that isn't happening this year, knock on wood. That they've gotten back to their great sound defensive ways right off the rip. Okay? And a couple of these that I want to highlight that were important. Anthony Santander, who we know is not the best defender out there. In fact, he's a prime candidate, if anybody on this Orioles team is, for a defensive replacement late in a game, putting Cowser or somebody in for Santander. But Tony Taters had not only a nice catch in the first where he had to track down a ball deep in the right field gap, and there was a man on at the time as well, so preventing an extra base hit absolutely by tracking that down, possibly preventing another run from scoring. Great job by Tony to track that down. He also had a nice diving catch in the fifth. I believe the bases were empty there, but still, especially if you're diving after a ball and you miss, that's extra base hits. But even if he just plays it safely and the guy holds up at first, yet another man on that the Royals could potentially do damage with. So, two big plays by Santander, and ultimately, it's funny, his lack of maybe athleticism when looked at against some of the other, not only Orioles, but major league outfielders out there, maybe caused those two to look cooler than they were. Like, if Santander had blazing speed, he would have been able to track down that ball in the gap sooner, and it wouldn't have been as close of a play. And if he was even a little faster, he probably doesn't have to dive after the ball in the fifth, right? But neither here or there. He's not a speedster. We've talked about that. He's a power guy. So the idea that he can play a good right field for us, and we know he can play a decent first base too, ultimately, but keeping him in the outfield not only just gives us flexibility, but it's also a beautiful thing to see him contributing with his glove as much as he's been contributing with his bat in these early games. So Santander with two nice plays. Then you had Adley in the sixth. It was kind of like a pop-up towards the away dugout, the third base dugout, and Adley had to track it down. It wasn't close to him. Again, it was at least wet-ish out there, potentially drizzling at the time. Adley not only slides, but makes a backhanded catch away from him for the out. And it was a big out because these were the middle innings where the Royals were starting to try to either pull away with the game or get back that lead. And these defensive plays allowed it so that the Orioles continued to not only tie up the game, but ultimately take the lead. And the next one was Ryan Mountcastle with a nice diving snag and diving tag. I believe it was in the seventh. And yeah, in the seventh. And it was, again, a sharp hit ball down the right field line. He not only snags it, but gets up and then has to run to first and ends up diving into the bag to tag it before the runner gets there. Just an unbelievable play from Ryan Mountcastle. And again, the flip side of what we saw with the Royals then later in the game in the eighth inning, because the Royals' first baseman potentially cost them that ball game. Meanwhile, Mountcastle potentially saved the game for the Orioles with that moment. So just big defensive plays all around the field. Again, we're talking. And then the last one I really want to highlight real quickly is when Yennier Cano got into a jam in the eighth inning, he ended up with bases loaded and 1 out. He was able to strike out the man for the second out. Or, no, excuse me. I believe it was a short pop-up right over second base, now that I think about it. And get it to 2 outs. But you still have to get out of it. Bases loaded, 2 out. And he gives up a little ground ball right past the mound to Gunnar Henderson. Certainly a ball that, again, in these kind of wetter conditions, heavier grass, the ball can die a lot quicker. And Gunnar comes up on the ball, makes a great play on it on a short hop, and fires it to first base for the 3rd out, getting the Orioles out of that 8th inning bases loaded jam. And just shows you how dangerous of a team this is. Because not only do they have one of the better relievers in baseball on the mound in that moment in Yennier Cano, but also they have the defense to back it up and show why their pitchers trust them so much to make the plays and be able to make these very difficult plays look easy, because Gunnar made that look very easy if you watch that. In fact, on first glance, to me, it didn't even seem like that difficult of a play until I saw the replay of it, and I was like, wow, that was actually a lot more difficult than it seemed off the bat. So those are some of the big defensive plays last night that really stood out to me. It was the first game where the Orioles were not only in that close of a game, but like that back and forth war where those defensive moments really happen. In the first 2 games, they dominated offensively so much that a great defensive play might not change the game here and there. That 3rd game, they didn't hit at all. And, the Tyler Wells had given up a 2-run home run. They were only able to put 1 up on the board. So at that point, no matter what the defense does, you can't win the game. If you're only going to score 1 and your pitcher already gave up a 2-run home run, it is what it is. No defense is going to steal that home run because it was a no-doubter. But ultimately, the Orioles defense came to play when it really mattered in that first game of the Royals series, a game where they really, really, really needed the defense to show up. And this is such a side note, but personally, it feels great to beat the Kansas City Royals because of them sweeping us in that ALCS in whatever, 14 or 15, whatever that was. And, I was so devastated about that sweep that while the Royals now are trying to become what the Orioles are now, and they might overall not be that good of a team throughout the whole season, still there's, and listen, nobody except Sal Perez is probably left from those teams. Still something, I guess I have a little chip on my shoulder against the Kansas City Royals. In fact, one of my best friends has a college buddy who we call Kansas, and he's a big-time Royals fan. And it's something I think of every time I see Kansas is his Royals beating me, and me and him have great conversations about it because as an Orioles fan and a Royals fan, we have a lot in common. Really, the only difference we have in common now is the fact that he not only got to the World Series, but then won a World Series in his lifetime, and I have yet to. Hopefully this is the year, though. We'll see about that. Again, they start with each individual game, guys. You can't win it in April, but you certainly can lose it in April. So it's great to see that these Orioles are doing everything they can to put themselves in a position where they can win it when it's all said and done. Okay? So the next thing is I want to get back on that Craig Kimbrel situation. Okay? First off, I want to just come out and say that Orioles fans booed him when he was leaving the field after the third out in the top of the ninth, after giving up that tying run. And that is not us, gang. I'm sorry. Right now, that's not us. Like, if Kimbrel continues to go out there and blow save after save after save and it's getting ugly, sure, boo. I don't have a problem with that. Give the guy more than one chance when it was a bloop single that fell in between a shifted defense with one of the guys, maybe the main guy responsible for getting it, misjudging the ball, coming in 2 steps before going back out to try and get it. I'm not putting serious blame on Kimbrel other than just seeming like he has a lack of care in the world about holding a man on. Because as soon as the Royals got somebody on, everybody, the announcers are talking about how, oh, well, he really doesn't hold on base runners. And again, it's something I forgot about. Again, I'm not like this over big Phillies fan. I'm a big-time Orioles fan. So that's what I remember throughout these seasons, the little moments, the little problems that players might have in their game, little holes. I remember from the Orioles side more than anybody else. So it was just something I forgot about with Craig Kimbrel. But last night, I was horrified because it's not going to cut it. And you're going to wind up getting deservingly booed from these Orioles fans if you keep doing this. I'm sorry. Orioles baseball is about ultimately doing the little things right. Okay? Doing the little things right. And one of the little things that you can do right as a pitcher that takes next to no effort is holding a man on base. Not just allowing the guy to run to second or third whenever he damn chooses. Craig Kimbrel needs to understand that he has to do better in those situations. I want to trust that the Orioles pitching coach and Chris Holt, the director of pitching, pulled him in an office today or last night and said, listen, Craig, that will not cut it. I'm not going to fault you for giving up the blooper. I'm not going to fault you for giving up the sac fly. I will fault you for allowing that man to go first and third unencumbered and allowing them to hit that game-tying sac fly. Because you didn't seem to care at all about holding the man on. Twice. So I'm sorry. Overall, it was some bad luck, and I'm not going to crucify the man for that. But gosh, that is not going to cut it if that's what he's giving us every night. Because that just means they need to get a single guy on and just have a single quick guy on the bench, which damn near every team will, at some point, have at least one guy who they trust to run the bases on the bench. And boom, we wind up in a tie ball game again, or worse. So, it's a problem. Him having zero ability to hold men on, once they get on, is an enormously huge liability. And if you want to talk about why ultimately he could lose the job, it's that right there. Now, I will say, as Orioles fans, we have to give him a little bit more of a chance. We can't be booing him right off the jump. no matter how horrifying last night's appearance ended up being. And again, it was 1 run, but it was a horrifying run based off of how the events that occurred in order to make it happen. Just got to hold the man on. Got to work on that. And if he's not willing to work on it, well, I would be willing to bet his days are numbered as the Orioles closer if that comes. And if that's the reason he's losing the job, he doesn't stay on the team. Like, that's one of those when you replace him, you cut him. Because he's going to be a liability for that at any point in the bullpen for you. Can't have it. Cannot have it. All right, so let's get to a little more fun of a topic, okay? Last night, well, let's just say, okay, so last season, the Orioles had maybe the most fun celebrations there were out there, right? It was this whole waterworks theme. Obviously, Mr. Splash in the outfield, okay? We would like squirt water out our mouths like a sprinkler anytime we got an extra base hit or like get a hit. We would do a sprinkler, extra base hit. Then the home runs, we would do the homer hose, and they would take a bong shot. It was awesome. It was really, really cool, and I loved it. And I know there was all this talk about how we're going to leave that in the past, and that's cool. I don't need you forcing the celebration. I would rather you guys come up with something you enjoy. Something new you enjoy, whether you like it as much or not. Like, there's always time to make adjustments and change. And if you start something, it's not working, you can always go back to what you did before. And now it becomes this thing where you're not forcing it anymore. You bring back the waterworks and everyone gets back in on it. I mean, we do have essentially the same team from last year. So it would play. But ultimately, I don't mind the guys going, let's leave that in the past and start anew with something else. And it was always the question of what it was going to be, right? Well, the first couple games you saw with some extra base hits and just some hits in general, you saw some guys like revving their engine or like with riding a bike or whatever it may have been, right? You saw, I think the one time you saw like Adley like looking like questioningly, what do we think? What do we think? It seems the vroom vroom is here to stay. Okay, it seems like that's the new celebration, at least for now. Because last night it took on another level, right? To legitimacy. When Ryan Mountcastle hit his home run and he made his way back to the dugout, they handed him, instead of the home run bong, the homer hose, they handed him basically like bike handlebars, all Orioled out. And he was giving it one of these, and he was enjoying it. He said later that when they handed him to him, he was like, he didn't even know what they were at first. He's like, what the heck are these? You guys got handlebars? And then he kind of got into it, and it seemed like everyone was enjoying it, right? Seemed like they have this new celebration, and I'm all for it. I want them to pick it. I want them to find something they like and they enjoy, and that's what it's about, man. So I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all about the handlebars and the vroom vroom, I think it's been called. And overall, it seems like Cole Irvin is the man who at least got the handlebars, which is about right, because last year Irvin was the one that brought the homer hose. And so it seems like it might be here to stay. I kind of enjoyed it. It seemed like they did too, and that's the important thing. It's kind of weird to me that it's Cole Irvin but listen, he's kind of, I guess, one of the team jokesters, team goofballs. And I'm fine with that. You need some goofballs, right? Lefty, back of the rotation or in the bullpen, that screams goofball to me. That's who you want as your goofball, right? So you want everyone to have fun, but there has to be a couple real goofs on a baseball team. Seems like Cole Irvin is that guy, at least for the moment. And I'm cool with it. I enjoy it. Now, I know Cole Irvin said that kind of came about because all these young kids and they're flying around and they're playing out of their minds. He said that they were on X Games mode. And so that's kind of where I guess it stemmed from. Listen, as growing up, I loved the X Games. When I was 13 years old, I was all about the X Games. When I came to Philadelphia, me and my dad had box seats to watch Tony Hawk and those guys, Bob Burnquist and all of those guys go after it. I know those are skateboarders. This is more of like a bike. But either way, what? Dave Mira on the bike, whatever it may have been, right? I enjoyed X Games. So X Games mode was kind of cool to me. I don't necessarily love it as much as the Waterworks and the Homer Hose. That to me was amazing. This is just cool, but it's not cheesy. It's not too over the top. Sometimes you see these teams do things and you're like, you'll never win a World Series doing this shit in the dugout. Like, some things you're just like, that's never going to get you over the hump. And while ultimately it's not what you do in the dugout, it's what you do on the field, like, some of that comes to fruition, and I'm about the handlebars. I think that it's a winning celebration, at least over that Mendoza line of winning. We'll see how much it grows. We'll see how much we get into it. And frankly, I think if it stays between the fans and the team themselves, it'll all kind of grow into more levels, which ultimately is going to make it cooler and make it more of something you remember. One of those things, I'm going to go back to a previous topic, is Jordan Westburg's mustache. There have been some talks that he's going to try and do the handlebar mustache for the handlebar celebration. And again, he might not even keep the mustache. Maybe somebody else winds up doing the handlebar mustache. But I could see this becoming a thing where like Westy and maybe Mountcastle grows his back. And maybe a couple other guys go with these handlebar mustaches. And like, it would give me a cool vibe. I'm kind of enjoying the idea of it. I kind of love it. Especially when you're winning with that stuff. It all just makes it better, man. So be on the lookout for guys to start growing handlebar mustaches. I think the only issue with that is we have such a young team ultimately that a lot of these guys probably struggle to grow a normal mustache and wonder if it can connect or they'll have some disconnections. Like, for instance, me, I would struggle. I think I got a little disconnect right there. Maybe that's where I chop it, wherever it is. I wouldn't be the best. In fact, this is about as good a facial hair as I can grow, gang. And even that is questionable. I say it's a beard if you call it that. It's facial hair. Might not even be a full beard. I don't know what you call it. But be on the lookout for a potential handlebar mustache craze. Not just with the team, but also throughout Baltimore and the fans. I could see the fans really going in on handlebar mustaches this season and them being all around Baltimore. And it would kind of be funny and it would kind of be cool. And heck, if the team really does well enough, maybe I shave it all except the handlebar mustache and I go with it also. So be on the lookout, gang, for the handlebar season. It's upon us. I don't know if it's fully here to stay or not, but it's fun and it's something enjoyable. And it seems to replace the Waterworks, even though we still got Mr. Splash out there in the zone. Maybe Mr. Splash changes his outfit a little and puts on a biker jacket or something like that. I don't know. Maybe the Bird is going to ride around the field on a motorcycle. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. All right. So one of the things that we talked about last episode was just some quick tidbits of how well Jackson Holiday and these other top prospects have been playing so far in AAA to start this year. And again, they're only a few games in. But through, I believe, 3 games, okay, I got 5 stat lines for you as far as some of these top prospects go. And it's amazing how much talent the Orioles have knocking on the Major League door right now. Pounding on the Major League door right now, okay? Now, just listen to these numbers. Between pretty much our 5 best, I would say, position players ready to take that next jump, okay? Maybe not when it's all said and done, the 5 best position prospects we have in the system right now, but ultimately the 5 best, most ready position players prospects we have right now, okay? Heston Kjerstad is 6 for 12, a double and 4 RBIs. Connor Norby, 6 for 15, a double, a home run, and 4 RBIs. Kobe Mayo, 5 for 14, a double, a home run, 3 RBIs. Kyle Stowers, 5 for 13, a double, a home run, and 6 RBIs. And Jackson Holliday, 5 for 14, 2 doubles, a home run, 5 RBIs, and 5 runs. I mean, we are talking about one of the most special core groups of prospects maybe we've ever seen. And you add that to the guys that are already up there in the Adleys and the Gunners. I mean, and the Westburgs. And then you add that to the level of veterans that they have. It is an unbelievably special team that we have right now. And the depth on the team is unheard of and potentially unmatched ever in the game of baseball. Like, when we look back in 20 years after all of these guys' careers are done, whether, obviously I hope like Adley and a Gunner and Jackson stay with the Orioles their whole career, right? And some of these other guys do. But ultimately, when you just look at these guys, not all of them are going to be an Oriole for the rest of their life. So when you look at their career as a whole in 20 years, and you look at just the prospect list, you're going to be like, God, the Orioles had about 50 legitimate major league players on their roster. And I don't mean like a guy that got a cup of coffee. I mean like players that wound up having 5, 7, 10 plus years in the majors as like at least a decent contributor. I'm not talking they're all going to be amazing, but like just turning into nice, at least average to above average ball players in Major League Baseball for an extended period of time. We're going to look back at this group in 20 years and go, holy cow, were they loaded? And we're saying it now. But again, we're saying it now in the way where we are undervaluing and underappreciating some of the guys like Connor Norby or Jordan Westburg, or some of these guys that maybe are even below those levels. So we'll see. We will see. I love where the Orioles are at 1,000%, right? Now, one of the things that I think how we're going to end the episode is Ramon Urias has had a brutal start to the season. And I'm seriously questioning how long the leash is for Ramon Urias, right? Last episode, we talked about, in my mind, the most likely candidate to jump up if they were to get rid of Ramon Urias would be Connor Norby, because Norby has consistently had a good chunk of time in the minors where he's done very, very well. He plays multiple positions. I think that Connor Norby would be the next one up to take Urias' spot. Again, Holiday is going to take Tony Kemp's spot, most likely, whenever that day comes. But Ramon Urias, I talked about needing to have this hot start to the season, okay? And he had a nice spring training, which ensured that he would be a part of this roster-breaking camp. But I said he has to continue to contribute and perform if he was going to continue to be on this team. And frankly, without Jackson Holliday up, he's getting his best chance and his best opportunity to solidify that spot on the roster for him and make his case. Unfortunately, he's doing the exact opposite right now. He started the season 0 for 10, only 1 strikeout and a walk, okay? But again, that walk's the only time he's been on base in 11 at-bats, in 11 plate appearances, I should say. And even in the field, where he's been so solid and so strong, heck, he won a Gold Glove, 2, if not 3 years ago? So he has that potential, and he has that ability to field great. He's only had 5 total chances, and he has 1 error on those 5 chances. So he hasn't even played great in the field. Again, we talked about that little blooper in the ninth and how he completely misplayed the ball. Now, I don't have the explanation as to why. It was just a mistake. These things happen, but it's one of those things. If you're playing great defense for me and that's your mistake, okay, I can handle that. If you're starting to look a little shaky defensively and you're not reading the ball properly off the bat and the balls then are dropping because you misread it, well, now we start having a serious problem, especially if you can't hit anymore. And one of the things Urias last year, but I think the last few years for the Orioles has been one of the best Orioles at, was his clutch hitting. And so far, he has, again, just not been a good hitter, clutch or not clutch. He just has not been performing. I thought last night for sure he would wind up getting a hit because he was facing a guy who he had success against previously. He's had that experience and good experiences against. And again, it just showed he didn't perform well. He didn't get a hit last night again. Now it's, I believe, 3 games he's been out there. No hits, 0 for 10, 1 walk, 1 K, and an error in his 5 total chances. Ramon Urias needs to pick his shit up quickly, or he might not be around much longer. Truly. And the annoyance is I was hoping that when his time came, he performed at least decent enough where the Orioles could ship him out for at least a mid-level prospect. Well, if he's playing like this and his time comes, it's one of these things you're just gone. I don't even know if I can trade you. Maybe for cash considerations, player to be named later, who could potentially become a name. That does happen. And I trust Mike Elias to be able to make that happen like he has in the past. Ultimately, though, Ramon Urias really needs to pick it up. And I know he knows this. We'll see if he can do it. Because this is his big opportunity. Because once Holiday comes, Holiday's pretty much every day at second. We know Gunner's every day is short. And then I think Westy would become every day at third. And so now, Ramon Urias, your opportunities are more limited. And you aren't getting as many at-bats. And that makes things tougher on a hitter who's struggling with success already. So don't be surprised if the days are numbered for Ramon Urias. I don't think Michael Elias is going to press the panic button just yet. I don't think he's going to overreact to a bad week, bad few games, really. So give it another week or two. But frankly, it would not shock me, right? For the Orioles, let's put this scenario out there. I want to put this reality in your heads because I think that this is very, very possible. And you see teams do similar stuff like this all the time, right? You bring guys up together. So we know 16 days was basically the minimum amount of time that Jackson Holiday could be down to pretty much guarantee himself another season of control by the Orioles, okay? So let's just call it that 16 to 21 days. In that range, Jackson Holiday gets called up. And we say goodbye to Tony Kemp and bring up Holiday. In that same breath, they could be like, you know what? Well, why don't we just bring up Connor Norby right now, too? And we get rid of Ramon Urias. And then out of nowhere, we blink and we have both Holiday and Norby up at the major league level. I think it's extremely possible. Now, maybe it's Kobe Mayo that takes that next jump. I think they want Kobe Mayo to continue seasoning his glove, especially in the minors, more. But I love the idea of bringing them up together. I also think that a lot of times that takes heat off of both prospects because the media isn't going to just key into one, even if one of them is the best prospect in the game at the moment, the number one prospect in the game. Still, the idea of bringing up Connor Norby takes some heat off of him. They now can do interviews together, kind of play off each other. They're now in it together, learning how to live in the major leagues. You know what I mean? Going city to city. They're roommates. They take care of, they do everything together. You start following each other around. You start becoming this group. Things just feel easier. You don't feel so left out, even if both of these guys were in major league camp. Both these guys know a lot of the guys on the team, and both have played with a lot of the guys on the major league roster in the minors previously. So while they're not completely going to a hardened veteran locker room where that's necessary and they're going to feel like loners, still, I think it's something we see MLB teams do a lot. And I think there's some sense to it. I think it makes some sense also. So don't be surprised if in, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks, both Holiday and Norby are on their way up from Norfolk to Baltimore. And how cool would that be, gang? And one of the things, maybe the biggest thing that can make that happen is, unfortunately, Ramon Urias continuing to struggle, not just at the plate, but also in the field. At a certain point, his Gold Glove is one of the main reasons why he was on this roster. So if that's not looking as sound, and again, I don't want to overreact to a few games. Last season, I also believe during that stretch where all the Orioles were struggling to play defense, Ramon Urias was one of the candidates also at that point who was struggling. So it's not insane for him to turn it around. It's not insane for his bat to turn it around. It's only 10 at-bats, 0 for 10, 1 walk, 1 K, 1 error, and 5 chances. We'll see. The numbers need to improve. All I'm saying is if they continue trending in this negative downward spiral, Ramon Urias' days are numbered as a Baltimore Oriole. And that means that not only is Jackson Holiday probably on his way up, but potentially Connor Norby as well. So, gang, that's going to wrap it up. We have a game starting in about 15, 20 minutes, I would say. And very exciting. Game 2 of this Royals series. Looking to win another series to start this season tonight. Really, obviously, hoping they get it done. Like we've been saying, need to win at least 2 of 3 in this first 36 every single time to put ourselves on track for an amazing season. Not that if we don't hit that, we can't still have an amazing season, because I think we will. But I'd love to be able to check off another series before the series finale. And hopefully they can do it tonight, gang. So that was tonight's episode. I didn't dig into box scores nearly as much as maybe I normally do. And I didn't even really talk about Dean Kremer, who started the game and had an okay day. Again, he maybe got a hit around a little early, but ultimately only gave up those 3 runs in 5 1/3. Had some strikeouts, really didn't allow a ton of men on, had himself a decent day. And the bullpen themselves had a pretty good day too, besides Kimbrel. And we did talk about how Yennier Cano, well, he might have gotten into the jam, got himself out of the jam. And that was amazing to see as well. So high leverage situations, especially in that Cano situation. Starting pitchers maybe giving up some runs early, but not panicking. It's great things to see, and trends that we've seen so far in this early season that I think are only going to continue. So with that, we're going to put a wrap on this episode. This was the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast, episode 14. Let's go, O's.
Talk